Hey everyone, Doug Adams here from RunDNA Podcast. Thanks for joining us. And today I want to talk about something that doesn't get as much attention as I think its counterparts do, and that's cool down. So a lot of people ask me about warming up and what they need to do, but a lot of people aren't always certain what to do when it comes down to cooling down after a run or after a workout. And I want to talk about that because when I first started working with a lot of professional runners, one thing that I really noticed was that they spend a lot more time cooling down than your typical recreational runner. So I got pretty curious about that, and I dove into some of the research and was actually a little surprised to find some of the things that I found. Because anecdotally, I found personally that a longer cool down can really help, especially for somebody that is getting back into the sport and has been away for a while. So somebody that may be just getting back into running, doing a little extra walking, where even sometimes I'll say up to a mile of walking after a run can really help just to get them to feel better after the run, reduce some of the soreness. And that's something I anecdotally saw. And I was fully prepared to come on this podcast and start talking about why everyone should take a longer cool down. Then I started looking at some of the literature. I started trying to understand, all right, well, is there any support for what I found? And what I found is actually there's not much support for it there. And I found a pretty good systematic review and looked at some of that about some of the psychophysiological effects and their effects on performance of doing an active recovery or a prolonged cool down. I thought it was a pretty well written article, but I think there's some things we should also talk about research. But the basic part of it that I thought that really it would be beneficial for cooling down for some of these interventions. And if you're listening to this, there's a good graphic on the screen. You might want to head over to the RunDNA YouTube channel to check out over there. A pretty nice graphic on here, just talking about some of the proposed benefits of cooling down for muscle adaptation and soreness and lactate, cardiovascular, hormones, all those types of things. And I will say I do really enjoy taking a nice little walk after a run, especially because I run in the morning and it's normally the birds are chirping. Today was an especially beautiful morning for that. Just a really nice little walk after a speed workout today here. So I really personally enjoy doing a little bit more of a cool down. But when you look at the literature, there's not as much evidence saying that it's having a large effect on your ability to participate in future workouts or your ability to adapt to the workout that you just did. But I've got to say, looking at this review, it's important to remember when you're reading literature that you shouldn't just look at the results or read the abstract, that you should try to understand the methodology and if it is similar to the way that you do things. So, for example, if you notice here, their definition of some active recovery included exercise in the water or biking or some resistance activities. It didn't really discuss walking or some uphill walking or other ways that I often suggest people cool down a little bit better by doing a prolonged walk or finding a hill and walking up it just to gradually ease down the demand on your body. So it's important to remember that, although I can't completely refute what they're saying here. It's important to discover that some of these things might be different from the way that you're doing it. And when you're looking at it, also making sure you understand that. And the other thing is also make sure that you're looking at what the proposed benefit is. So, for example, in this article, they talked about foam rolling and an active recovery and foam rolling. And they looked at it and they were looking at 5-meter and 10-meter sprint performance, saying that foam rolling doesn't help with 5-meter and 10-meter sprint performance. Now, that's not something most of my athletes are really concerned with. So if they tell me that they really find that foam rolling helps them to be less sore or to be able to perform better the next day, I'm not going to go and tell them, well, you shouldn't do that because foam rolling doesn't help. Because that, in my mind, is a study that is limited, and that might be something that is more beneficial for a person participating in football or field sports where they're going to be doing shorter, quicker sprints, and maybe they're doing 2-day sessions. But for a runner who's doing these things, that's not quite as relevant. So I think what I found, and some of my thoughts of why are these professionals doing a lot more cool down? I think they're actually trying to get a lot more volume in, and it's important for them to get the volume in, and doing a hard workout or doing some shorter efforts, they might need to get more volume in order to get some of the performance gains that they want. So you have to consider that what's the purpose of why they're cooling down. And maybe I thought that they were doing it to be less sore and be less fatigued. I think a lot of at the professional level, they're trying to actually get more volume in. So for recreational runners and for newer runners, I think there's still benefit for doing a more active cool down, but it's going to have a different reason why. And maybe doing a walk or doing a prolonged run might not be the answer for somebody that's a recreational runner, but doing a walk or doing some exercises might have a benefit. But I have a little bit of a different take on this, and I want to share a practical approach to what I think is how we should determine if a cool down or even a warm up is really necessary. And the practical approach to it is that it depends on how well you're moving. So, for example, before I go on a run, I use the runner readiness assessment to determine how much I need to warm up. So I use the 5 fundamental movements, which I'm doing a squat, I'm touching my toes, I'm bending backwards, I'm standing on one leg, and I'm twisting, and I'm seeing how those movements feel. And I know where I have my deficiencies in that. And when I get ready for a run, I am checking to see if my squat feels really limited, if I'm struggling with balance, if I feel pretty tight touching my toes. And if I'm limited in those things, then I warm up until I feel like I've made enough of an improvement that I'm ready for the workout that I'm doing that day. And my thought for cool down is that it should be the same type of criteria. If you're done a run or a workout, try doing a squat, try doing a toe touch and see how you feel. And if you're having trouble with those movements and you're able to do that before the workout, then more of a cool down might be beneficial to help restore some of your movement patterns. And I think that that's how I practically have looked at cool down, to see where I'll do some squats or some lunges. I'll do some exercises after a workout if I feel like I've lost some of my movement capabilities, just to help me return to some of my normal mobility. The other thing that I think is a practical approach to cooling down is that it shouldn't be necessarily limited just to the immediate time period after you're done a workout. When you're cooling down, when you're thinking about it, one thing I try to do, like I told you today, I did a track workout and I had a good session, and I did a little extra walking after it because it was a harder session for me. So that was part of it. But that doesn't have to be the end of it. I think that more frequent movement, where you're avoiding periods of inactivity after a workout, is much more likely to contribute to this. Now, I'm not familiar with literature or evidence for that. And if somebody is, I would love you to share that and put that in the comments. And I'd love to see if there is any literature with that. But I think frequency of movement and prolonging the cool down to being not just the immediate time after it, but going for a walk. Like today, I am getting up and trying to say no more than 45 minutes of sitting at my desk and getting work done. I need to get up and move. I'm going to take a walk at lunch. I'm going to take another walk in the afternoon. I'm going to try to make some of my meetings walking meetings today, just to keep consistent activity to avoid getting tight or stiff from some of the work being done. I think that that helps to regulate and circulate some of the cell metabolism waste. And I find that I'm much less sore the next day if I can be more frequent. So just quick summary here for a quick episode. The literature isn't great on an active recovery, but that doesn't mean it's not important. I think that we should really be focusing on restoring movement patterns and making sure that we're getting back to at least our baseline, and then looking for consistent movement throughout the day after a workout to make sure that you're moving back to returning to your normal mobility. So hope this helps, and happy and healthy running. Thanks for tuning in to the RunDNA podcast. If you want more of this information, make sure you head over to RunDNA.com and sign up for our newsletter, where we're putting out helpful tips all the time. Thanks for listening.
Like what you hear? Leave a review of the show wherever you listen, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. RunDNA helps runners and running specialists through education and technology to identify each runner's unique injury profile to avoid setbacks and maximize results. The RunDNA podcast is produced by Ace Running LLC. The RunDNA podcast is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can occur. Always seek the guidance of qualified medical professionals before making healthcare decisions. Find us online at RunDNA.com.